I'm like skidding in sideways, barely making it in time. For some reason, good morning, party people. For some reason this morning, I was up at like 1 a.m. this morning because I'm getting my sleep schedule on for SQL Bits. So I'm presenting 2 all-day pre-con workshops at SQL Bits on, what is it, Tuesday, Wednesday? Tuesday, Wednesday, I think. So when I do that, I gradually wake up earlier and earlier in order to get on the United Kingdom sleep schedule because my class starts at 1 a.m. and goes to 9 a.m. And so I've been getting up early and earlier, and I'm good morning, party, Brent. Good morning. Lots of good. Neil, SQL Dev, DBA, D Sanchez. Good to see you this morning. I keep getting up earlier and earlier. Well, I'm close to the UK schedule, SQL Surly Dev, but not quite there. And then I got started watching James May videos this morning and Grimes music videos. I just went down into a YouTube rat hole and saw that James May is selling his Ferrari 308, which is a 1970s, 80s kind of classic Ferrari. A lot of people say is one of the best looking Ferraris ever made. And I was listening to him talk about why he's selling it. It's obviously he doesn't need the money. The guy's got an insane amount of money. And he said he was selling it because it's an old car and he's realized he doesn't like old cars anymore. Good morning, Santi. And Shirley Dev says, do you want to buy it and keep it in my house? I would buy it in a heartbeat if I lived in the UK. Like, I would not even blink. I would have called up immediately and been like, I want that. That is exactly the kind of Ferrari that I've always wanted. But listening to James May's explanation, he goes, this 1970s Ferrari is a good car if all you've ever driven is 1970s cars. But if you've driven anything like a modern Honda or a modern Toyota or a modern Ferrari, heaven forbid, or Porsche, then it just seems like it's terrible. And I was like, oh, wow, that kind of makes sense. Because I've ridden around in old 80s and 90s cars, and I'm like, oh, 70s, 80s, and 90s cars. And I'm like, oh, yeah, the defroster doesn't work. The air conditioning doesn't work well. The steering sucks. It's hard to see out of. There's all these things. Still, Kendra, you should buy it. Kendra's a Volkswagen person for sure. Jeremiah might buy it, interestingly enough. I should actually, although, you know what? I don't know that they have a parking space. They were in an apartment in the UK, but they just recently bought a house, and they might have a garage now. That's an interesting thing. I could totally see Jeremiah buying it. So good morning, party people. We'll go to another totally Q&A webcast. This will be, again, the last. I'm kind of hit or missing during this time of year, but this will be the last Q&A for probably 2 weeks. I'm off for a couple of weeks. I say off, I'm actually working. I have SQL Bits this morning. Mossy Moss and Suvir, good to see both of you. Working SQL Bits Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Fridays, and then even Saturday morning. And then Saturday morning and Sunday, I have an emergency client. Then what am I doing next week? I'm not even sure what I'm doing next week. Now I got to go look at the calendar out of the week after that, the week of October. Oh, I'm going my friends in Bulgaria. Oh, yeah. Doing a remote engagement with great friends of mine from the Isle of Man that I just absolutely love working with. Neil says, what's the time now? Well, most people would check their watch, but I can see how you would go into a webcast and ask a complete stranger what time it is. Oh, Dave. Oh, good to see you. But it is 6 a.m. here in San Diego. So Google account says, hi, Brent, I've learned a lot from you. I still have a lot to learn. Good. Welcome to the club. Welcome to the club. I know I always feel like I still have all kinds of stuff to learn. It just never frickin' ends. All right, so let's get to it. Let's go take a look at the questions that have come in so far. Now, those of you who are asking questions, you'll find it easier to get into the queue on Twitch. Like if you just go into Twitch and put questions over there in the chat, you can. Those of you on YouTube, there will be a bit of a lag. Please just only ask your question once. Don't throw it in multiple times. It goes into a queue here on my fancy pants monitor that is managed by Surly Dev. So a round of virtual applause for Surly Dev for managing with the questions here. He's a moderator here. So let's see here. Surly Dev asks a great question actually this morning. And I saw this in the chat coming in. Oh, somehow it got cleared out again there. Surly says, is it pronounced SQL or SQL Server? There is an ad from Bill Gates. If you go to YouTube and you search for Bill Gates ad SQL Server, he recorded a video with, I want to say, a guy from Borland. and it's an old school like 80s 90s looking video, but I would totally recommend it because it's very funny. If you search for Bill Gates ad SQL Server, and inside the span of a 1 minute ad, he pronounces it both ways. He pronounces it SQL Server and he pronounces it SQL Server, which I find kind of funny. So if he couldn't get it like consistent one way early on in the product's genesis, yes, it is the best Miller Lite commercial ever. It's pretty funny. So there's that one. And Surly or from CW Train, good to see you. Says, are always glad to see someone who keeps the early morning schedule. Yeah, the way that I've always worked is that on my weekend mornings, so weekend mornings from about like 5 a.m. to 9 a.m., before my wife wakes up, is my time to go do professional development type stuff. So I'll do blogging, I'll do don't ever say team because there is no one opinion amongst the Microsoft team. And as you can see with the Bill Gates ad, he goes both ways inside the I don't mean he goes both ways. Maybe he does. I would join Bill Gates' team if you know what I mean. I mean, the guy's rich. But so from 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. is my time to go do whatever I want for professional development type stuff. And then once my wife wakes up on the weekends, I tend to, shut the computer down, bail out of the office. I've been telecommuting since like the early 2000s. It's just such a godsend, just such a wonderful thing if you can have a separate home office and then walk out of there. I know so many of us are having to telecommute. Welcome to the club, same 16 King. So many of us are telecommuting now for the first time with the whole coronavirus thing. And it's so hard when your home office is in the bedroom or it's in the living room, dining room, because the computer is always staring at you 24/7, going like, please come work on me. I'm also not the kind of person who can play video games either, because if I have to sit down in front of a video game, I'm like, oh my God, this is like work. Why would I want to work? That's also why I like iPads, because it doesn't feel like work. I can just consume. I don't have to type anything. Cranky Older Gentleman says, I like your new nickname there. I have an application that's slow. How do I make it fast? So it's really funny that I think you're probably just throwing this question in to warm up the queue, but I always think of it as there's 3 knobs in dials. I try to say dials because my United Kingdom friends tell me that knobs is a kind of a slang that's not appropriate, not that they look to me for saying appropriate things. But 3 separate dials that you can turn. There's the hardware dial, there's the table design dial, and by that I mean tables, indexes, how you store the data on disk. And then there's the querying dial, how you write queries to get the data in and out. And so any of those 3 dials you can turn, but you've got to turn one of them. Either you've got to turn the hardware dial or the storage, like table and index dial, or else the query dial, but you got to pick one of them to turn. And sometimes I'm working with clients and they'll say, you can't tune the query dial. The query dial is set exactly where it is. We can't change anything about the application, in which case I go, oh, okay, so we can either still buy hardware at it or we can tune tables and indexes. So those are the 3 dials, and you just get to pick which one or ones you want to turn up. JP says, what do you think about Python with pandas? Is it more efficient than SQL for data manipulation? So it depends on the kind of manipulation that you need to do and whether or not you're going back and forth to the database each time. Generally, the thing that you should use a database for is a back end. Like, this is where you store the data. Generally speaking, you don't want to do a lot of manipulation if it involves thinking on the database side. Like, you don't want to go replace a bunch of strings or aggregate things and build brand new tables from scratch. That's where I'm like, go pull the data out somewhere, do whatever juggling you want. The exception, so the reason why I say that, SQL Server Standard Edition, $2,000 US per CPU core. Enterprise Edition, $7,000 US per core. Python, carry the one, $0 per core. So if you're going to do something CPU intensive, you're generally better off offloading it somewhere else. The exception is if you have a lot of row by row work. If you're going to pull out one row, do something, and put it right back in again, SQL Server is probably going to involve less round trips back and forth. Cranky says Surly Dev thought so, was trying to make trouble, and so I thought I would as well. And that's good, but it's one of those where, like, I actually get that question all the time, which made it really funny, and I was like, I should totally answer that. W. Rossi says, we have a database with a lot of polymorphic tables. What's the best approach for performance optimization with those tables, and what impact might it have on statistics? I'm guessing, I'm not sure about this, but I'm guessing that you're probably using the entity attribute value design pattern, and I'll show you something. So if you go to Google and you go search for entity attribute value Aaron Bertrand. Entity attribute value Aaron Bertrand. Aaron's got a blog post talking about this design pattern, assuming that you're just talking about keys and values and you're using the same table to store lots of different kinds of keys and values. This is a good place to start talking about the problems with statistics and indexing, things like that. If you're talking about just using SQL Server as a key value store, that's something different, but go into a little bit more detail there about the problems that you're facing, for example. Okay, next up, let's see here. Next up, let's go with, that's actually a really good question, Jan. Jan says, how do I decide what size and growth rate TempDB should set? When I'm dealing with a brand new server that nobody's ever touched for a really long time, and they're like, go build a brand new SQL server, and they're going to enable features like RCSI or snapshot isolation, things that have a new effect on TempDB, I'll say, in terms of TempDB sizing, just start with 25%, 1/4 of the total database size on the server, just to keep the numbers simple. If you have a terabyte worth of databases on the server, you're probably going to need at least a 250 gigabyte TempDB. And the more that you turn on different features, the more that can start to grow. Or the more your application starts to create all kinds of tables in TempDB, the more that can also start to grow. But if you have absolutely no idea, that's just usually the place that I would start. It's hard to micromanage it these days when I like to jokingly tell people that, look, my iPad has 1 terabyte worth of flash solid state. Why micromanage it? It's not like storage is that expensive. And then they're like, oh no, but wait, we're in Azure where the storage is really expensive and it's slow. And I'm like, well, that's poor decision making on your part. Next up, SQL Santa says, every time DBCC check runs on a particular table, the performance goes for a toss. I expect just one particular index when I update its stats. Why do you think this might be? I have a feeling that you're running SQL Server on an Etch-a-Sketch, because 300,000 rows is not a lot. 300,000 rows is actually fairly small. The possibility might be you might have varchar max or nvarchar max or image or ntext or binary or XML or JSON, some giant data types inside there, and maybe the size is large on disk, like a terabyte or larger, but at 300,000 rows, I'm like, the Stack Overflow users table, which is like the smallest table in the database, is like 9 million rows. So I think you might be running SQL Server on an iPad kind of thing. Next up, SQL Dev DBA asks, for failover cluster instances, what's the best approach for system databases? You actually don't get a choice. They have to go on a shared drive, so it makes it kind of simple. System databases have to go on a shared drive so that if you fail over the cluster from anywhere one node to another, that the system databases are always available. If it's always on availability groups, that's different, since at least today, the system databases don't move around from one node to another. So it's nice that you just don't have that much to worry about. TempDB is a little bit different. I like putting that over on local solid state, just because especially in a failover cluster, you're usually talking about multiple nodes scattered around in different places. Local solid state's just cheap as chips. I mean, it's really inexpensive. Jan says, talking about the TempDB files, do you mean the sum of all TempDB files or each data file? The sum altogether. So like if you have 1 terabyte of user databases, 250 gigs worth of TempDB, if you break it up into 4 files, that's 250 divided by 4. I'm not very good at math. If you choose 8 files, it's divided by 8, and so forth. Next up, Sukhveer says, from the last stream, you said SQL Server does not need a PG bouncer. My team lead, I don't see the harm. What harm do they advise? Let's try to keep these to smaller, tighter questions. I'd love to hear your life story, but your team lead does not want a connection pool for each app. I don't even understand what you're talking about with your team lead there. That is insane. Okay, so let me step back a little bit. SQL Santa says 64 cores at 250 gigs. Something is wrong then in terms of that one, if you're the one asking about CheckDB. So Sukhveer, the connection pool is set at like .NET. It's set at the application. Now, if he doesn't turn on connection pooling, every application will all send in tons of unique queries. SQL Server doesn't have its own connection pooling. SQL Server expects that your developers have their pants and their underpants on. They also expect that the underpants are on the inside. It's the application's job to manage its database connections. It's just not the database servers. So that the whole PG bouncer thing in terms of connection pooling is because a lot of open source applications, they don't have their pants on, or the underpants are on the outside. Sometimes they're on their head. So in the Postgres world, we have to deal with that. In SQL Server, not quite so much. Next up, let's see here. VR Copula, which is kind of like Count Chocula, but different. It's with virtual reality. Says, wants to know if page compression on a table updates or affects update performance. Is the effect significant enough to go against compression? Oh, that's so good. So my thing with compression is usually that I see people micromanaging it on really small databases. And when I say small databases, this is a USB thumb drive. See, it's so small it's hard to even get the camera to focus in on it. This holds 128 gigs worth of data. So when I see people trying to micromanage compression on something that's smaller than a USB thumb drive that I use in my car for MP3s, I'm like, what are we trying to achieve here? What's the big goal that we're trying to get? And sometimes I see people trying to use database compression in order to improve performance on a server that's like a Raspberry Pi. I'm like, you can play with that if you want to. It's not going to be the thing that gets you across the finish line. Where does it get you across the finish line? If you really have compressible data that repeats itself a lot, screw compression. Go to column store indexes. Column store indexes are really where the compression bang for the buck is. Makes a much larger difference. Speaking of which, this week's sponsor is columnscore.com. If you've been thinking about putting in column store indexes on your SQL Server in order to improve reporting speed, you can get a simple 7-question quiz over at columnscore.com that will tell you whether column store indexes are a good fit for you or not. So if you want to implement column store indexes, go to columnscore.com. Back over to next question. Pythor says, dealing with a database with poor documentation and a history of changes, what's the best way to track down tables, views, indexes, store procedures, etc. that aren't being used? So I would ask, what's the problem you're trying to solve? So let's talk professional development here for a second. If I was your manager and I came to you after 2 weeks, and I said, hey, Pythor, what have you been doing lately? And you were like, well, I was trying to track down stuff inside our database that isn't being used, like old stored procedures and indexes and views. I was just trying to track them down and then go write documentation on them. Okay, so did users like congratulate you in the hallway on the way out the door? Just be careful that you're actually focusing on things that your users actually need to see done. Maybe pivot and go over to your users and say, hey, what is it that would make you happier? What would make a bigger bang for the buck? Screw old stored procedures sitting around there. Screw old views. Don't worry about it. Go focus on what's going to make them happier. Now, there are times when you want to check and see which indexes aren't being used or which tables aren't being used, and I'll show you that, but ease up on the documentation side of it and just like, hey, I'm trying to learn about things that aren't being used. It's kind of like saying, well, I want to make my spouse happy. I want to make them a happier partner, so I'm going to go through my basement and go look for things that aren't being used. Your spouse will be too busy taking their things out to the curb in order to go get an Uber and leave you. They will not be too impressed at you cleaning out the basement. So to see tables and indexes that aren't being used. So if I go over here to SQL Server and I go look at, I'm going to zoom in, SP Blitz index, get all databases equals 1. This gives you kind of like a psychology test on your indexes, and it tells you things like if you have tables that aren't being used, if you have indexes that aren't being used, goes across all your databases. It does have some limitations. It's a totally free open source stored procedure. You can just go Google for it and go download it off my site. It does have some weaknesses. It's only tracking data since your SQL Server restarted. So if your server restarted within the last 3 days, it's not going to be as useful. But listen, Gangster is turned into SQL Server Gangster. So if as long as your SQL Server's been up for a few days, though, it'll at least give you some vaguely useful information. What's going on with that light? Why is that light not working quite the way I want it to? That'll at least get you closer. All right, next up, let's see here. Next up, we got, Jeffrey. Jeffrey's trying to get me into trouble, see? Do you think SQL Server Enterprise is about the same performance as Oracle, standard edition on the same hardware? I have no idea. And vendors, both SQL Server, both Microsoft and Oracle, prohibit taking benchmarks without their express approval. So I wouldn't expect anybody to have good benchmarks out there on exactly the same hardware comparing the two. Usually, if you're going to try to choose between the two of them, I'll tell you what it comes down to. It comes down to who your executives are more buddy-buddy with. You know, at the end of the day, if their performance is even like 30, 40% similar, like one's 30 or 40% than the other, then the handshake deals in the back room, executives, they don't understand anything about social distancing. They're still in the back rooms of like steak restaurants, making deals with their bare hands and arm wrestling. It's gross. I've seen videos. So that tends to come down to just backroom decisions. So 30, 40% doesn't really make a difference. Next up, G-Surgeon, hello Netherlands, says, I use Ola's solution and I love it. Just one thing. The full backups work perfect, but the diff fails saying there's no full. Oh, that's interesting. That is really interesting. If the VM snapshots aren't doing copy-only backups, it is entirely possible that they're ruining the diffs. I've never tested that to go see. Go check with your VM admins and have them walk you through the backup software that they're using and see if they can change their full backups to copy-only backups. Usually with most software, it's just a switch, like they can just flip a switch. If they can't flip a switch, because I've seen cheap third-party backups that do snapshots that can't, like they can't turn on copy-only, then there's nothing you can do to fix that. You have to just lose the diffs and switch over to log backups. Jeffrey says, we're a college, so we don't have the backroom deals. Oh, yes, you do. Yes, with educational licensing, you can absolutely still do the backroom deals. But, Jeffrey, there's a reason why you don't know about them. You're too noble to go into the back room. I appreciate that. You're a nice, clean individual, so good for you. Ender says, how are you liking your new keyboard? I love it. I also like that the lights I can just turn on whenever y'all are here, because I don't usually keep crazy lights on like this. That's just not how I roll. But it has all kinds of different like light patterns and stuff, so there are different things that I can do. We'll pick a different one that I haven't used in a while, so like the little but it works really well with the Mac, with Bluetooth and all that. I should probably change the timeout because it times out after like 5 minutes. And then I have, you'll notice sometimes when I go in and connect to the server, I have to click a few things in order to reconnect. But it's pretty spiffy. It's pretty nice. I just wish it had USB-C ports on both sides so that I could recharge it from either side. But talk about tiny things. Next up, G. Bargsley asks, if you see a lot of ad hoc plans in cache, does it make sense to enable optimize for ad hoc workloads? You know, that's one of those things. It's kind of like stickers on cars. You know how sometimes you'll see people put stickers on their car and they think their car is going to go faster? It's pretty rare that that switch makes your SQL Server go faster. There are super rare edge case scenarios where you're actually coming under memory pressure due to the amount of plans in the cache, but it's super rare. The thing that usually makes more sense there is force parameterization. And I'm not saying to go turn that on, but what I am saying is go find what your biggest performance problem is and work from there instead of trying to reorganize the basement while your spouse is on the way out of the house. Next up, let's see here. Someone says, only, and I don't even know what this is about, only with SQL Server 2012 and up, how can I get it to work for 2008? So 2008 is, let me check my watch. My goodness, that was a long time ago. And you know, oh my goodness, it's 2020 now. Wow. SQL Server 2008 is no longer supported by Microsoft. And you know, if a big monster company like Microsoft can't support it, honestly, they even have trouble supporting SQL Server 2019, if I'm honest. So if they can't even support SQL Server 2008, I don't know why you would think that you can. That's the same thing that I say with customers who come to me with 2008. I'm like, if Microsoft, it's true, yes. Good, I like how Pierre was going with that. That's pretty good. So yeah, it's the same thing that I'll say to customers is that if Microsoft can't support it, you know, how am I supposed to? Shankar says, can you tell me how to improve skills? Yes, I assume that it's someone else's skills. You're tired of those dumb coworkers that you have. They're just idiots. They're not paying any attention. And they're not as good as you. You are looking to maintain your own skills on a Sunday. Good for you. That's just fantastic. So you're absolutely idiotic coworkers who don't know very much. You should get them to come onto YouTube and LinkedIn, all places like that where there are lots of blog posts as well, and they can start learning too. Because of course you already know how to improve your skills. You're right here inside a webcast learning from other people's questions, so you're doing just fine. D5x5 says, what's the best approach for code reuse? For me, stored procedures. I like stored procedures because they have less performance impacts than user-defined functions. There are some kinds of user-defined functions that don't have performance impacts, like inline UDFs. But the problem is, as soon as I create a table-valued inline UDF, somebody goes behind me and they start adding more statements to it. And next thing you know, they have a huge performance overhead. So with stored procedures, I just don't have to worry about that quite as much. Let's see. Oh, Johnny says, for the first aid kit, does it only work with SQL Server 2012 and up? How can I get it to work for 2008? Most of the stuff actually does work with 2008. SP Blitz First, I believe, still does. But anything that doesn't work with 2008, you are out of luck. Time has marched on. Neil says, your session is too good and funny. That's great. Hi kids, I try to keep it clean too. I try not to swear too much. Gustavo says, hi Brent, what's the best way to start on a SQL Server world with focus on business intelligence? A book, a video, a course, thanks. The best way to start is go ask your manager what problem they need solved. Like sit down with your manager and say, okay, what if I worked on something for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever, what would be the thing that I've created after that 1, 2, 3 weeks that you'd be excited about, that you'd be willing to let me spend more time working on business intelligence and start doing it on company time instead of doing it on my own time? What would that thing look like? And then go figure out how to go build that thing. What I wouldn't do is I wouldn't go speculatively trying to learn random things. Because if you're learning random things, that means you don't have real world experience with it. It's going to be really hard to get a job with that. Like if I just randomly Google how to make macarons, or macaroni, I'm probably not going to get a job working with that. Whereas the network that I already have, like managers, bosses, etc., people in the business, they'll be more likely to get me more money, and that's the problems that I want to focus on. Next up, Atif says 7462 is retiring in January. Is it still worth it on my resume as a DBA? What certs do you recommend? I don't recommend any Microsoft certifications at all because they change their minds on them, just like a 6-year-old trying to pick out between chicken fingers, macaroni, and pizza. Oh, I think I want this. Oh, I think I want, oh, that sounds good. Oh, maybe we could get Chinese. They have no idea what the hell they're looking for there. It makes no sense whatsoever. So there's no real brand traction on Microsoft certifications right now. If you feel like you know a topic well, go get the certification for it. That's fine. It's not that big of a deal. But if you don't, and if you do have it, go ahead and leave it on your resume. That's totally okay. Just know that there is some negative connotation. There is a backfire with Microsoft certs. Those of us who don't really get into the Microsoft certification thing will actually look down on folks who put the certification on their resume sometimes. I've worked with some hiring managers who are impressed by certs, but also some lead DBAs who are like, if somebody puts a cert on their resume, they have a problem. Next up, Al Getty says, greetings, Brent. Maybe it's an arrogant question. Those are my favorites. Some people are convinced to use MongoDB because it's faster than SQL Server. They aren't watching your videos about indexes, right? MongoDB can be faster than SQL Server. And I'm not joking. Because if you think about Mongo's licensing costs, how much Mongo costs in order to install and run, versus how much money SQL Server costs in order to install to run. If I gave you $50,000 to go buy SQL Server and the hardware for it, versus if I gave you 50 grand to go buy MongoDB and install it, guess which one's going to have better hardware? Because if you don't have to pay the licensing for things like SQL Server, you can get away with less licensing spend and more hardware spend. And then depending on your use case, if all you're doing is passing in a key and you're getting a value back, that can actually work better. And I'll tell you what, over on the other side, SQL Server can perform poorly too if you've got some ham-fisted administrator who doesn't really understand what they're doing. It's a poor musician that blames his instrument. A crappy musician can make any kind of guitar sound great, whereas if you put a guitar in my hands, it doesn't matter if it's, a Fender or a Gibson or whatever, it's going to sound like poop. It's going to sound terrible because I just don't know how to play the guitar. So there are times when any of them can be faster than the others. Cranky older gentleman says, the only thing I considered for certs was that it might get your resume past the first pass. The thing is, if your resume is in a stack of resumes with other people, you're screwed anyway. Because there's always going to be somebody whose resume looks a little better, or who's willing to work a little cheaper, or rubs elbows in the back room with somebody else that you don't know. The instant that you have to rely on a stranger giving you your job, you are screwed. Instead, that's why you start blogging and recording webcasts, doing YouTube, showing up in chat. Because, like, for example, if you start a cranky older gentleman, I don't even know what your name is, but I know from seeing your COB nickname in the past. Like, if you sent me your resume and you're like, hey, I just got laid off, it would be a much faster route to me getting you work. Whereas if somebody's just, going and taking exams, they don't stand a snowball's chance in heck. So. Next, see, G. Donfrio says, I can't find your guide to configure from SQL Server from zero. I can see why it would be hard to find that. Because if you go to a search engine and you search for Brent Ozar SQL Server setup, see it even auto-corrected right there. I can see how that would be just really incredibly difficult to find. No, actually, I can't. So back over here to next one on the list. I know, I'm a terrible person. It's amazing anybody ever comes to this webcast twice. I mean, once I could understand, but why would someone come here twice? It's one of life's great mysteries. Not even really a great mystery. Next up, George asks, should we enable query store on a database with 30,000 batch requests a second on average? Oh, this is so good. So the thing is it 30,000 of the same queries again and again, or is it 30,000 different queries per second? If it's 30,000 truly different queries per second, or if they have option recompile on, you may find challenges with query store. But if it's 30,000 of similar queries per second, you can be fine. It's not that big of a deal. Query store's kryptonite is a truly random workload where all kinds of different queries come in at the same time. Next up, AJ says, hi, I'm going to take 754. What do you recommend to read? I don't even know what any of the Microsoft exam numbers are anymore. But I'll tell you what I would do is I would go get the official study guide from Microsoft, because Microsoft writes the tests. Then they also, Toby, I know, right? That's how I always am, Toby. So Microsoft writes the exams, so they're also the right ones to go get the study guide from, because all the questions are freaking made up. They're all just whatever Microsoft wants to measure on that particular exam, so it doesn't have anything to do with reality. Like their database administrator exams, they don't have anything to do with what database administrators really do. Their developer exams don't have anything to do with what developers do. So you really just kind of have to eat from their hand in order to pass their exams. That's why a lot of Microsoft exams, they have to be profitable. Microsoft picks and chooses how they're going to do profitable exams. So you really don't, it doesn't make sense to go anywhere else. If they're going to try to make a profit off of you repeatedly passing or failing exams, just go get their study guide. It sounds so terrible, but. Next up, let's see here. Santi says, a query warns about memory granted versus used. When it's executed 10 times, 5 times it gives no warnings, and 5 times it does. Query has no filters. What do you think or suggest in this scenario? Well, if your query has no filters, I was going to make a joke there about how I don't really have a filter either, but I'm not going to do that because that would involve me saying some things that wouldn't be very friendly in terms of families. What I would suggest is adding a filter. So there's this thing called a where clause, and it sits right at the bottom. Right at the bottom of your query. It lets you filter and only get some of the rows back instead of getting all of the rows back every time. That's probably the place that I would start. The second place that I would start, if you for some reason can't put a where clause on your query, is MongoDB. I'm just only joking there as well. Next up, G. Donfrio asks, are temp tables better than table variables? And are they the best alternative to split a complicated stored procedure? Yeah, I go with temp tables better than table variables, but I'm going to show you one of my favorite questions of all time. If you go for temp table, table variable, SQL Server, there's a question at Stack Overflow here. What's the difference between a temp table and a table variable in SQL Server? This is fantastic. The question has 391 upvotes, and then the answer has like 400. That's incredible. That's absolutely fantastic. And it's way detailed. And I don't want you to think it's one of mine. It's not. It's some person named Rory's. But this is absolutely fantastic. Check out this question. What's the difference between a temp table and table variable in SQL Server? It goes into total details. It's very, very good. Next up, we have Warab says, in the year 2020, does it still make much of a difference having dedicated drives for data and log files when we have high-performance SSD and NVMe? The place where it can make a difference is if you can tune the settings differently on those drives. Like if you've got, say that you're in a shared storage environment, you're dealing with virtual machines and the virtual machine storage is out on the SAN, you may have different caching options or different pools of storage options for data versus logs. But if it's just a big pool of storage and you don't have any different options, then yeah, it doesn't really make sense to split those up onto separate arrays. Next up, Al Getty says, SQL cursors must always be avoided, right? But there are always ways to avoid them. Why does the function exist? The function exists because there are some things that you can't do in a set. I'll give you a great example. Back up a database. If I want to back up all of my databases, I have to do it in a cursor because the backup database command doesn't take a server name. For example, you can't just say backup server. So you have to back up your databases one at a time. Cursors are one way. They're not the only way, but they're one way to accomplish that. Next up, I Mohammed says, in a data warehouse scenario where I load a table that has indexes, we drop the indexes and load. All right, get back to me when you've got a question. Thank you very much. When producing content, how do you think about the difference between blogging and videos? Ooh. When people are searching for a problem, they generally search with text. So they'll go to Google and say, how do I blank? So most of the time I focus on writing. The time when I do videos is when I have to hold someone's attention for, say, 30, 60, 90 minutes. If I have to hold your attention for a long period of time in order to do a bunch of demos to thoroughly dive into a topic, then a video is generally better. Because you just don't see people reading something for 30, 60, 90 minutes straight. Even if you go buy a book, it's so rare to see people actually go through and spend 60 to 90 minutes on it straight. It's super rare. Whereas if you're animated enough and you hold their attention enough with things like sound effects, then you can start to keep them entertained for 30, 60, 90 minutes. It also works really well here with I can't possibly write questions fast enough to write answers fast enough to go through all this stuff. And people have a kind of much lower tolerance for exactness when it has to be in writing. They want it absolutely perfectly exact in writing, and I can be more. Maro, no, sorry, I'm not doing those. Thanks though. Next up, we have Scott. Have you seen SQL Server performance issues when the OS power plan is set to balanced versus high performance? Yes, back in the year like 2000. Recently, no, because recently it's been, there are usually so many layers of abstraction between you and the bare metal. Like these days, most people are doing their SQL servers in the cloud or they're doing them in virtual machines. So you can flip that power plan button all you want. It just doesn't make that much difference when there's that many layers of abstraction. When you're running on bare metal, I absolutely have. It's just that I don't see that many SQL servers running on bare metal these days. It's like maybe one out of 5 or 6. One out of every 5 or 6 servers I get to see, I get maybe one bare metal box, and that's it. G. Bardsley says, what are your thoughts on the removal of SQL Server 2019 CU? Maro, I appreciate that. No, I'm not, Maro, I'm not trying to do this for exposure, though. I appreciate you, but no, I don't need you insulting me here on my channel, so I'll just go ahead and block you. All right. So, G. Bardsley says, what are your thoughts on the removal of SQL Server 2019 CU7? My thoughts on that. It's hard to write software without bugs. I get it. And SQL Server is incredibly powerful. It has so many freaking features. It's insane. And it's really hard to get all of those features to interact perfectly with each other and to test them all. So when they pulled CU7, when they pulled it, I was kind of like, I feel you. You just can't have software without bugs, and I don't want to poop on Microsoft for doing a great job of running to the front of the room and saying, hold on, folks, I can't tell you everything yet. We can't give you perfect documentation, but you need to stop deploying this. I was like, that's awesome. That's really, at the end of the day, that's all I can ask for when software has bugs. Do I wish that the software had less bugs? Yes, especially for software that costs $2,000 to $7,000 a core. But I understand when it does have bugs, so I kind of get it. The thing that makes it really tough is that we're trying to tell people to stay current on their patching levels, and it's hard for users to do that. I know when I was a database administrator, if I took a SQL server down for patching, and then I turned around and I had to tell my users, sorry, I've got to take it down again and uninstall it, they'd get kind of antsy, and they'd be like, well, look, Brent, if you just wouldn't have taken it down for patching in the first place, we wouldn't have this problem. And I'm like, I kind of get it. So it's an awkward. And I also get how with Azure SQL DB, you don't have this problem because Microsoft deploys patches whenever they want, and they can roll them back whenever they want. So they just never even tell you when you have the bug. So there's kind of that. I have very mixed feelings about that. Next up, Ms. Classification says, hello, Brent. Where can I learn more about source control for SQL Server? Can I recommend good tools? I can't. It's really hard with SQL Server, but I'll tell you who to go learn it from. So if you go to YouTube and you search for Alex Yates SQL Server, Alex Yates has several videos about how to do this exact kind of thing. He has videos about CI, CD, version control, deployment, all kinds of stuff. So go watch Alex Yates videos on SQL Server. There's not a book I can point you to, and I also wouldn't feel comfortable pointing you towards tools because the problem is that anything that I would tell you is going to be out of date, and at least the things that he's going to tell you are going to be more current. Now, keep an eye on the dates. Obviously, that's 3 years ago. There's 3 years ago. He's got newer videos down there, too, as well. All right, next up, let's see here. Let's switch over there. And we've got... JP asks, what are the most common mistakes for setting up a SQL Server for the first time for small companies? Oh man, I'll tell you what. God bless them. Hitting next, 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 finish. That by far and away, the defaults for SQL Server installations haven't been a good idea for 20 years. So if you Google for a SQL Server setup checklist, and I don't even care whose you Google for, just any SQL Server setup checklist, will knock out most of the problems that small businesses usually run into. And the common stuff hasn't changed either. So that leaving cost thresholds set at the default is a classic one. Leaving max memory set at the default, those are also classic ones. And I can't blame small businesses because people just hit next, 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 next because you think the defaults are going to be good. And it's hilarious that the defaults are not good by default. Next up, Damar over on YouTube says, we deliver software and manage SQL Server machines for our customers. One of our POs, is that pissed offs? Is that what it is? It's pissed offs. One of our pissed offs wants to build a monitoring app with SQL Server and Power BI. Should I tell him about existing monitoring programs? Yes. Next question. SQL Dev DBA says, you had a great video GitHub for DBAs. Thank you. I appreciate that. My thing was really just to show people, hey, here's 101 level. Here are the things that you want to go focus on. But I didn't want to teach somebody how to use it, but I just wanted to show people, hey, it's not as scary as it seems. Because it scared the hell out of me the first time that I saw GitHub. I was just like, ooh, it's a merge conflict. Oh, gosh. Surly Dev says, I always keep my social media from my work or future employers. Are you saying it might be beneficial for me to mix the two or to keep them separate parts of my life? Asking for a friend. Here's my thing. There are two sides to this. One is the employer side and one is the employee side. Let me tell you about your side first because you'd be the employee. When someone hires me, I want them to know exactly who I am. I want them to know what my fetishes are. I want them to know what I'm interested in, what I'm not interested in. Because if somebody hires me knowing all of that stuff, it's going to be a great place for me to work. But if I put on a mask, and I don't have a mask handy because that's not my fetish, but if I put on a mask and I'm like trying to be someone that I'm not, I'm going to be miserable the whole time I'm at that job. For the longest time, for like 30 years or whatever, there was always this advice, you should keep work and personal completely separate. But think about now, all of us are working from home. Our employers are seeing our background or seeing us inside our house. We're wearing our pajamas. You really want the kind of shop where you're going to feel comfortable and at home. Now let me turn it around on the other side. Let me tell you about the employer. The employer wants to see all your fetishes too, because they, of course, want to know that you don't have anything truly freaky, like a furry or something like that. They want to know that you're not someone who's going to really get them into trouble, that you're not building bombs in your basement or something like that. But it will endear them to you if they go, oh, that's Surly Dev. We see him all the time on YouTube. We've seen him in chat at Brent's stuff. We know that Brent, he has a relationship with Brent. He talks with Brent back and forth. Really funny, I'll tell you a story. A friend of mine who was in a running for an executive job recently listed me as one of his resources, or one of his references. And the company isn't even a SQL Server company, but the people who are hiring him were like, wait a minute. You know Brent Ozar? You have his home phone number? And he's like, well, yeah, I mean, we've been out to dinner a bunch of times. He knows me, he knows my family and all that. And they're like, wow, well, you must be a big deal. And then they ended up, I don't know if they hired him or not. I know they made him an offer, but being more transparent and open in who you are with the community can pay off in the funniest ways when you're going to get a job. And on the flip side, it can also backfire if you're known as that guy hangs out on Brent's webcast. That might be a really bad idea. All right, I'm kind of Atrionic says, yeah, I'm kind of a big deal. I follow Brent Ozar on Twitch. All right, so let's stop here for a second. We'll take a bio break. We'll take just a 5-minute bio break. You can go run to the loo, refill your coffee, espresso, whatever. And when we come back, we'll keep going with the other questions over there in the stream. So I'll see y'all back in here in 5 minutes. Welcome back, party people. Let me see if I can get for some reason, I think the chat stopped working. Let me see if I can refresh that little fella just to see if that works. Refresh cache of current page and say, okay, we'll see if that pops back up. We'll see, is it ready to display messages? Now we'll see if it actually displays the messages, and we'll go from there. Okay, oh yes, Mossy Moss, yay, thank you, that actually worked, that's actually cool. All right, let's see what we got next here. So Surly says, that's going on my resume, I know Brent Ozar. Also, everyone should say a round of applause for Surly Dev for managing the question queue today. Thank you, Surly Dev, woo! Because if it wasn't for him, I would go absolutely insane trying to manage the question queue, because y'all ask a lot of questions, and people put all kinds of crazy stuff inside the chat too as well. Next up, Burax, I like the little B there, that's kind of cool, said, my friend, I like what you did there, said you shouldn't inform your employer about existing tools that do what they want. Instead, it's better to build them from scratch and maintain them yourself. So the thing is, let's say there's this thing called NIMBY, or not invented here is another way of saying it, not invented here, which means that if you didn't invent it yourself, it's no good. If executives see that you're reinventing the wheel on company time, they may go, oh, that's the guy who's trying to just make busy work for himself all the time. We should probably let him go and we can replace him with an off-the-shelf tool that costs way so much money instead of spending so much money on him as a tool. So yeah, for me, it's like I would much rather rely on something else, especially if that something else is open source. The one thing to be aware of, though, is make sure it's still actively maintained. I'll give you a great example is ORM tools, object relational mapping tools. If you decide to build your own interface to SQL Server, if you try to keep up with Entity Framework, you're going to have a bad time, and your feature set is going to suck compared to Entity Framework, and your bosses are eventually going to be like, wait a minute, we could have just used something off the shelf from Microsoft, and it's free, and it works way better. So next up, Hosantia says, if I'm installing a SQL Server on a physical server, should I install Hyper-V or just install it directly on the server? Let's see, how would I say that? It's kind of like, I'm going to go get a car. Should I go have someone else buy that car and then I'll ask them to use it whenever I want to use it, or should I just use it myself? Generally, the less abstraction layers there are in between SQL Server and the hardware, generally speaking, the better off you're going to be in terms of performance. The selling point for stuff like Hyper-V or VMware or anything like that, the selling point for that is that if something happens to the underlying car, you can just go switch over to another car. Like if something breaks on the underlying host, you can just fail over to another host. That's true if you have extra hosts. It's not true if you don't have any extra hosts. And by the sounds of your question, it sounds like you only have one server. In that case, I would just install SQL Server on it and call it a day. Next up, let's see here. Contact Administrator says, hi Brent, I'm confused with page latch waits. Are page latch waits on page latch and page latch on TempDB different? Oh, it's such a neat question. And I don't know that I can do justice to it quickly. I have a whole video dedicated to that. I'm tempted to, let's see if we can find it on YouTube, because I think it's free. Let's see if I go to, I want to say I did this one for Redgate. Brent Ozar Redgate TempDB video. Let's see if we can find it there. Oh, it is. I think it's inside here. I think if you, as a matter of fact, I know it is. There's six scary SQL surprises. If you go, welcome to the club, Danny. If you go search for Brent Ozar Redgate TempDB video, there's a video of me, oh my God, that's 7 years ago. It's probably even older than that. Where I did a session in Seattle, Washington, overlooking a water. I can remember how that worked. And that is going to be where it explains the differences between page latch waits and what they are in user databases versus what they are in TempDB. So let's come back over here and see. Next up we have Malik. Good to see you again, Malik. Thanks, Early Dub. Is there any way to track or block user ID based on their host or machine name or IP? Ooh, I would honestly do Windows Firewall for that. Like, I think Windows Firewall might be a better, safer way to go about doing that. The less that I have SQL Server looking at host names, machine names, or IPs is probably the better. I don't know that I would want to try and do too much security inside T-SQL. Having said that, you might be able to do it via logon trigger. As I spill a coffee all over myself. The problem with logon triggers is that if you get them wrong, people can't log in. So I would just be really careful with that. But login triggers may have the ability to do what you want there. Give that a shot. Google account says, I just finished how to do think like a SQL Server Engine Part 3. Thanks a lot. You are welcome. I appreciate it. I really believe that that's the first video that how to think like the engine should be the first video that anybody sees when they start working with SQL Server. Just an introduction to here's how queries work, here's how clustered indexes work, non-clustered indexes. And that's why I still give it away for free, because I think it's just so important to show people that so that they understand good mechanics of how the server works. And I know database administrators who've been working with SQL Server for 10, 15 years, and they still learn things when they watch that video. They're like, oh, I never thought about it that way. So that's excellent. Next up, Bob the Lobster says, hi from a hospital in the UK. Oh, I hope you're doing okay. I hope you're just there as like to fix their SQL servers. Hopefully you're not in trouble there. Next up from YouTube, Hessam says, sometimes I see customers don't upgrade their SQL Server instances because they don't know if an app works with the higher version. Can't lower compat level help on these situations? No. So app compat level is about T-SQL. It's not about how the engine behaves. Microsoft is aware of that problem, like they're aware that people aren't upgrading because of that concern, but unfortunately there's not a fix for it yet. Next up, Angry Scott says, from a busy application perspective, reading data from SQL Server, how do you feel about the usage of with no lock? Google for my name and with no lock, and I've got video demos that you can watch that are only like 60 to 90 seconds where they explain how you get garbage data out. If you really truly don't care about the data, if you're okay with random data coming out, no lock is okay. That sounds like I'm a joke, or it sounds like I'm joking. I am a joke in more ways than one. It sounds like I'm joking, but the thing is, you can literally get data that you would never have expected, data that changes, data that is completely inaccurate, and there are times when that's okay. One of my customers runs an e-commerce website, and all they want to do is they want to run a query every 60 seconds that just shows, are orders going through the system or not? Just yes or no. Are we still showing orders or not? So they use no-lock queries just to make sure that shopping carts have been moving through the system. They don't care if it's transactionally accurate. They don't care if it misses a whole bunch of baskets or gets a whole bunch of extra baskets. For there, no-lock is fine. For anything like determining someone's paycheck or just which medications you should dispense, it probably doesn't make sense. Oh, looks like the chat thing hosed up again here. Let's see if we can refresh it one more time, see if that does it. I'll even try, I'll check something else, and that may help make sure that it pops up again each time. Next up, let's see. Misclassification says, I'm thinking about proposing to my team to use SSDs for the database and hard drives for the log files. Can you see any problems with that? What year is it? Why on earth would you use hard drives in the year Do you work for Seagate? Do you like having a collection of them in the basement? Do you think that they get better with age, like they're some kind of wine? This is not Pinot Noir. This is your data. In the day and age where your tablet has 1 terabyte worth of solid state storage, there is no way in hell that you should be using hard drives in order to store your data. It doesn't make any sense. I have to keep checking my watch because did I go into a time machine? Why on earth would you want to use hard drives? Okay, so some of you in the audience are young. Some of you don't know what an HDD is, and I'm going to explain it to you, and this is going to sound strange. When I was your age, people like me in misclassification, we had, in order to hold data, we would hold these little discs made out of metal, and they would spin at thousands of revolutions per minute. And you would have a little arm on there that would move around. It would actually move in space. There were little hamsters in there. They had harnesses attached to them, and they would run from one side to the other whenever they wanted to read from different areas of the hard drive. And then they would fail. The hamsters would start limping and it wouldn't move around quickly enough. Next thing you know, the hamster's foot is caught in the drive and the data. I know it sounds ridiculous, but that's how we used to read data. It's unbelievable that any of us even lived through that. There's no reason in the year 2020 to use that hot garbage. Next up, VR Copula says, is there any alternative to the stuff function? My requirement includes getting a comma-separated list of employees under a certain manager. There's this thing called an application, and that's what you want to use the application for, is you go ahead and render out the list in a set. Databases, they work in sets, not secs. That's totally different. I mean, you could have a set of secs, but it's going to go off the topic real quickly. They work in sets. So you just send the set back, and the application will then go and digest those results. Umer says, do you recommend using a third-party monitoring tool? If I was to go take, I never know whether I should say if I were to take or if I was to take. Thankfully, no one hires me for my English. But if I had a real full-time DBA job again, I would make it a requirement of the job that I would have to have a third-party monitoring tool. You may know me from some of the first responder kit scripts that I write, like, and I'm not the only one who writes them, like, SP Blitz First. There are lots of community contributors. But even though I love and use those all the time, I would have to have a third-party monitoring tool to do my job, like to alert me when the database mirroring fails, when the availability group goes down, when the TempDB runs out of space, all those things. Third-party monitoring tools are amazing for that kind of thing. Curly Bracket AI over on YouTube asks, which I love. Oh, it's like Chance the Rapper, but it's Chance the Owl. Welcome to the club. Or Chance the Rapping Owl. How amazing would that be? Curly Bracket AI, which I still just love that name. Can a user of Postgres learn something from your streams and videos? It seems like bad manners, how not to address a crowd, low theater quality productions, sound effects, the usage thereof. I would think so, because it feels like about 30-40% are professional development type things, and then 50-60% are databases, so I would say yes, and it's the other 10% is about math. Next up, Warov says, where should I look to reduce header sync commits when I know that network and I/O is not the bottleneck? Oh, that's a great question. Microsoft has a blog post about this. If you search for header sync commit blog, let's see if we can find it, because it's going to be, that's it right there. If I remember right, that's it. Yep, that's perfect. Okay, so if you search for header sync commit waits and that guy's name, Saurabh Agarwal, there's a great blog post with how to troubleshoot it, and I should have a prefix of a warning on here. This blog post is not for people it's not for 99% of people, where header sync commit is almost always storage or I/O. I mean, almost always. But by the time that you try to get it down to look, Goodoff says, is he even looking at Twitch? I am, but that wasn't really a question, right? It's not questions. Users, I swear to God. But so most people don't need this, but if you've gotten your header sync commit weights down to an average of 2 to 3 milliseconds each, maybe 4 milliseconds each, then that's where you start to look in at this stuff. It's not easy. It's a giant pain in the rear. It's a whole lot of work. Mo-chan, welcome to the club. Next up, what do we have here? Next up, let's see here. In a data warehouse, for a table that has a clustered index and 3 non-clustered indexes, we drop the indexes. Does the order of creating the indexes matter? Yes. Yes, the order of indexes does matter. First create the clustered index, then create the non-clustered indexes. And the order of non-clustered index creation can even matter. It's beyond the scope of something that I can answer quickly here, but you should be able to test it pretty quickly in order to see for yourself. Where I'm especially worried about it is if I want to build an index, like one wide index may be able to satisfy the creation of several subsequent, more narrow indexes. Think phone book. You're probably too young for this, whatever. Phone book used to be on last name, first name, middle initial. Well, if you go create a phone book index, Damar says the following sound is very loud. Oh, sorry about that. Let me go, I can fix that real quick. And turn that down. He says, distracts from the sound of your voice. I know you have a personal love affair with my voice, so I got to make sure to fix that. But if you create an index on last name, first name, middle initial, then later you want to go create another index on just first name, SQL Server can use that wider index to create the narrower index and avoid scanning the entire clustered index. So that's how that can make a big difference there. Let's see here. Techno Thirsty says, could you please explain in which use case we should use column store indexes? Yes, in fact, that's what our sponsor this week. So if you want to find out whether or not your tables are a good fit for column store indexes, go over to columnscore.com. At columnscore.com, you can fill out a quick 7-question test to see whether or not your table is a good fit for column store indexes. Then don't start by like grabbing a tool and then finding the thing to use it on. Go answer the questions on there, the 7 questions about your table, and then from there you'll learn whether or not your table is a good fit or why, and you'll get links to other resources that explain how to learn more about that. Next up, let's see here. Drop table in places. Also do a Google search for recursion. Jose says, are there any advantages of using SQL over on Linux other than possible savings on Windows licenses? No. Okay, so in fairness, instead of just being sarcastic, the edge case where it can make sense is if all your sysadmins know Linux and they don't know anything about Windows. In which case, why on God's green earth would you be using SQL Server? Go use a database that works on Linux. You got an array of them. There's MySQL, there's Postgres, there's Oracle, all kinds of damn things on there. Why would you want to use SQL Server? But the use case that Microsoft touts is when your sysadmins use a SQL Server. Nadir says, where are these questions being asked? Hi, welcome to the internet. Yes, the internet. That's where they're being asked. They're not being asked in the room, as you can see. There's no one here in the room. Next up, we have RDDBB says, I have a SQL Server with mixed authentication, which is not as good as mixed drinks, which is what I need right about this time of the morning. SQL Server will fail to log in, and then it'll successfully log in. The passwords are fine. I think there's stress, or where should I look? Oh, that's a great question. The error log. And I'm not being sarcastic. I'm sarcastic a lot. But check the error log on the SQL Server. Odds are there is something broken, and that's just the place where the errors are logged. But it's funny that I really don't look in the error log very often, but that's one where I'm like, oh, I would totally start there because you're probably going to see a lot of stuff inside the error log there. Yes, exactly. Next up, what's SP Help DBA? What causes session to be in a dormant state, and is it safe to kill it? Classic example, someone starts a transaction, locks their workstation, and goes home for the weekend. That will do it. An application bug will do it. Is it safe to kill it? Here's the crappy part. If that person did a whole lot of work and then locked their workstation and left, if you kill it, rollbacks are single-threaded instead of being multi-threaded. So that can cause you problems in terms of rollbacks can take a really long time. Rather than killing it yourself, here's where to go look. So go search for Brent Ozar Triage SQL Server, and I've got a video on how to triage SQL Server emergencies. In here, I talk about the scripts that you use in order to diagnose what work a server has done, or what work a query has done, and when it makes sense to kill the query and when it doesn't. It's all totally free if you search for Brent Ozar Triage SQL Server, and then that way you can learn whether or not it's safe to kill those queries. Next up, Rohit asks, the limit clause doesn't work in the SQL Server version that I use. What the hell year are you on? What version? When did that even come out? I don't even know when that came out. Was that like 2005 or 2008? Go get on a currently supported version. It's not something that you can download in a service pack. You want to get on a currently supported version of SQL Server. Let's see here. Fernair asks, any good resources that you can suggest to learn on partitioning tables? I want to say Kim Tripp has a Pluralsight course on it. Let's go see. If I search for partitioning SQL Server Pluralsight, 60 seconds, 90 seconds. Okay, no, that's just the video, so that's not going to work. That's not good either. Okay, all right, so much for that. Let's try this. BrentOzar.com, go partitioning. Because we have a landing page on it, I just can't remember. Oh, yay! Oh, that's fantastic. So if you go to brentozar.com/go/partitioning, brentozar.com/go/partitioning, that will take you to our partitioning landing page. The thing is, it hasn't been updated in like 5 years probably. So there are links to other good resources out here. None of it's new because partitioning hasn't really changed that much in a long time. Just that some of these links may even be dead, but that'll give you a good starting point there. I could have swore Kim Tripp had a good session on that in Pluralsight, but there you go. All right, next up, Sashin says, one of my friends says, I like how you did that there. One of my friends says stats of a table is 1 8K page. Is it the same for partition tables as well? Are statistics created at a partition level? How should we manage stats for them? To manage statistics, boy, you could do a whole course on that. I'm trying to think of the easiest, quickest resource I could send you to. Like the easiest, quickest resource you know what I would do is I would go to our YouTube channel, because you're on our YouTube anyway. Go to our YouTube channel and scroll down to statistics. And there's a course from Doug Lane on statistics. It's about an hour or two long. Go through there and I don't know that you're going to find the answers that you're looking for, but it's getting pretty narrow and deep. This isn't going to be a quick, like 60-second answer there on stats. All right, let's see here. Next up, Drop Table Employee says, my 7-year-old saw my screen and mentioned that Brent looks like Tony Stark. I get that a lot. And if I had an Audi R8, I would totally be like right there. That's the reason why I wear this, because you can't see the thing underneath me and all that. Oh, wow. Sukhveer says, if you had a time machine to use once, which part of your career would you change? Oh. I would not change anything. I wouldn't change a thing because I am ridiculously lucky. I work about half the time. Maybe half the time. I feel like I'm the laziest person that I know, that I don't really work that hard. And I have the extreme fortune of loving what I do. I have a Porsche 911. I have money in the bank. I have a wife who loves me. I'm just tickled pink. I love what I do. Do I want to retire someday? Sure, but I love what I'm doing. It's just fantastic. If you made me go back, if you said, Brent, you have to pick one point that you're going to go back to and you're going to go and change, I would go to high school. And I had an interview to go to MIT. And I went on the interview only because the advisor kind of made me. And when the person interviewed me, got done with the interview, I was trying to decide whether or not to go to MIT. In reality, I was like, no one wants me at MIT. And the guy says, "Are you sure you don't have any questions for me?" And I'm like, I don't think I'm really for MIT. I don't think that MIT would want me there as a student. And he's like, "Who do you think that they want?" And I'm like, "People who are smarter than me, it's not it." And he was like, "You're smarter than you think you are. You should go for it." And I never did. I didn't do it. And I wish I would have. Not enough to go back and change my career because things would be totally different. But limit my SQL syntax. There you go. And I always think of like top or offset fetch. Offset fetch is the one that I always think of. So a good point there. So that I don't know that I would go back, but if I did go back, I would go there. But the thing is, I know if I went there, I would be a totally different person. I wouldn't have my wife. I don't know that I would have had the incredible journey that I've had. So it's a tough call there. But great question. Next up, Prana says, "I appreciate your effort in explaining the basics of SQL Server as well as the advanced stuff. You're welcome. Been your fan for past 3 years and have learned a lot. Any amount of thanks will be minuscule." You're welcome. That's fantastic. Yeah, for some reason, Twitch isn't showing the messages on screen, and I don't have an easy way of porting them across. I have them on my monitor, though. I would pick up and show you the monitor. If I move it around there, you can kind of see it's right here. This is Twitch right here. And I'll make it bigger on the screen just so that I jump around and see it. Next up, let's see here. SP Help DB says, "I don't understand people encrypt SP and I have to use Profiler. Are there tools to easily access the text?" Yes. Search for SQL Decryptor. SQL Decryptor, it's a for-pay tool, but you can use the free version of it in order to decrypt an entire database's stored procedures within seconds. Super easy. SQL Decryptor. So somebody says, okay, as long as you can see them. Yeah, I am. Next up, Nanny says, "My database has multiple files on a single drive. Is there any benefit to having multiple files on the same drive?" There can be. You tend to see it if it's like a terabyte or higher, and specific things around restores, backups, speeds of certain operations, but it's pretty edge casey. Usually it's only around a terabyte or higher databases where I would even get close to recommend. I can't remember a time in the last 5 years where I've recommended people add more. I'll give you an example of one where I have seen it show up. So I've seen somebody with like a 5 terabyte data warehouse, and they used to have a whole bunch of files on individual volumes, and then they migrated their database over to a new server. They moved it with just backup and restore, and the new server just had one big pool of storage, so they made just one big volume, so they moved all the files over with it. So at that point, it didn't really make sense to redo all of the storage structure in order to get down to one file. It's not like there was a performance benefit in having just one file. On YouTube, Jeremy says, "I come for the SQL tips. I stay to see Brent dole out the harsh truths," which is another thing that I couldn't do if I went to work for somebody else. If I went back to like MIT or whatever, I wouldn't be able to be my own boss. Pierre, I think that there's something else at play there. So there. Next, Todd, go back to the previous, or watch the earlier parts of the stream. I actually answered that question with a person to go watch. Oh no, Bob the Lobster says, "I'm in the hospital as a patient, unfortunately, and my data connection isn't good enough." Oh no, sorry to hear that. I hope you get to feeling better. I hope you get out of the hospital alive. Please, I need you. I can't lose any subscribers. That's not necessarily true. I could lose a few of them, but not you. You're one of the smart ones. These other ones, oh my God, I could lose lots of them. Many. Next up. Oh, whoa. Thesagan says, "What tools would you recommend to stream data to a table in SQL Server 2017? Example, Kafka." I'm not a fan of insert. Just insert statements. If you needed to bulk load, and when I think about bulk loading, I'm like 100,000 rows at a time or higher. Look for bulk load SQL Server. There are tools like BCP, SSIS. There are tons of tools to use. But it strikes me as kind of odd that you would want to hook up Kafka to SQL Server 2017. I think there's something else going on that's a little weird there in terms of merging those two. So I have suspicion. It's kind of like saying to me, hey, how can I hook up my garden hose to my dishwasher? I'm like, that's not usually what people do with those two tools. You might have a legit reason for it. You might have a legit need for it, but you're not going to find a lot of answers as to that particular combo because I don't think you're hooking up the right tools to each other. Let's see here. Sachin says, if we have an index as well as, how will the optimizer decide which stats to use? Why do you care? Like, what difference does it make? Next up. Nadir says, what is a recursive stored procedure? Oh, what you do is you look up in the books online, you go to stored procedure, comma, recursive, which will send you to recursive stored procedure. Oh, I was too proud of that. How to identify least timeout root cause on an always on cluster. I opened a Microsoft case and they're asking us to run. Okay, so just so I make sure I understand, you're saying that you called Microsoft and you can't get an answer. So you're going to random webcasts and asking questions on your production SQL server that's going down. And you expect some yo-yo who has a webcam to give you an answer that Microsoft support can't give you. I agree. I find that all the time too, actually. I get better support from YouTube and Twitch than I do from Microsoft. But how to identify the cause. If I remember right, there's a really good blog post on that. Let's see if we can go find it. So let's see, and I might even have it in my bookmarks. Let's see, I'm going to say lease. No, I don't have it in there. Okay, so let's see, always on lease time, oh, not leave, lease timeout. I'm going to do site Microsoft.com because I'm vaguely remembering that it was a, look at that. Look at that. Okay, so here's what you want to go do. Search for always on lease timeout site:/Microsoft.com. Don't use Bing. God only knows what kind of results you're going to get. But in there, these two were actually the one that I wanted to point you towards. So I love it when that actually works. So go do that. Check those out. Always on lease timeout and go hit these. And put always, that's fine. That is what it is. All right, next up. Let's go see. Goof Off says, Brenozar, this is more conceptual. Blah, 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 blah. Any resource. Okay, so I'll hold off and I'll get to wait till I can get that on screen. Steve says, regarding update stats jobs, how do I know what stats to update and when to update them? We don't have any jobs. Oh, here, I'll show you. So go to Brento's or go to YouTube and search for Brent Ozar. And then I have a video channel on here, Brent Ozar Unlimited. And if you scroll down in through here, there are all kinds of videos, but there is an entire set of videos just about statistics. And this one I did about like 1 month ago. It's fantastic. I go into details inside there. I shot it overhead. I'm very proud of how that thing worked. And then you can watch the rest of them, and it gives you more details on how stats work, how they influence execution plans, how they don't influence execution plans, way more stuff. So really, really in depth there. And totally free. Absolutely for free. Next up, let's see here. Over on YouTube, Catharsis says, or Carthacan says, how do I rebuild non-clustered column store indexes? When we tried to alter index rebuild, the index pages became 0. I'm not sure what you mean by the index pages become 0. Sounds a lot like what I do on a Friday night after I've had a whole lot of tequila. So you may want to include next time when you're searching what the exact error message you are, or my guess is that maybe something else is going on behind the scenes there. Things don't become 0. Garam Masala, it's been a while since I've seen you. Garam Masala says, could you please point me somewhere other than MSDN where I could get a list of all the DMVs, system function views, and their examples? Books Online. Seriously, Books Online. Like, Books Online is exactly what that's for. It's absolutely perfect. You're not going to beat Books Online for that. It is chef's kiss. I always want to say French kiss when I do that. But hit Books Online. Now, what you're probably going to come back to me is, but I only want the important ones.
That's where my training classes come in. Ladies and gentlemen, if you go to brentozar.com and click training at the top of the screen, there are training classes on index tuning, query tuning, parameter sniffing, and server tuning, and more. I teach you which things you want to pay attention to. I show you how to use the first responder kit in order to query those, and I even walk through some of those, what those DMVs mean and what they don't mean with examples. All of these can be yours for the low, low price of, I have no idea, but that's on my website right now, so go check that out. brentozar.com/training.
Quodson says, do you have any advice for someone going from SQL to PL SQL? I don't, but there are, if you search for like T-SQL, PL SQL cheat sheets, there are a bunch of one-page PDFs out there that will give you mapping of one command to another. And I've really enjoyed those because I've used a couple of them as I transition between them. I don't have a good example of one because I don't keep the cheat sheets around anymore, just because I've learned enough now that I don't need them anymore. But just search for that, like T-SQL to PL SQL cheat sheets, and there are going to be a bunch of one-page PDFs out there that are all quite good. Pro Hiller says, I need to prove that one login causes the vast majority of blocking. How do I go about doing that without calling SP who is active? What you want is called the blocked process report. So you're going to search for SQL Server blocked process report. And there's a really good, and you can search for that alone, and there's basic docs and tutorials about it. But the one that's really good is Michael J. Swart, not Michael Jordan. Block process report, Michael J. Swart, and he's got T-SQL out there, examples on how you set it up, a way to view the process, or the way to view blocked processes. So this is something that you have to turn on and you have to collect the data and monitor, but the overhead on it isn't bad. You're not going to find a lot of tutorials out there because not a lot of people need to do what you're trying to do, but that is the way that I would go about doing it. I haven't done this in probably 10 years, but I haven't seen a better way than this. You could use extended events. You could throw in extended events, set up an extended event session just to monitor this stuff, but I think you're going to find that this is going to be easier. So the blocked process report viewer there. Next up, let's go see here. What do we have next? We have, interesting. Mochan says, what are your top 3 security concerns with SQL Server that people commonly disregard? I'm going to give you the top 1. The top 1 for me is linked servers. That people create linked servers to other servers and then they use really high privilege accounts to do it. So like people who can query the server have all kinds of permissions over on the separate linked server. And so that's a real quick, easy way to get privilege escalation and then be able to create logins yourself, do all kinds of nasty things. I see so many people who create linked servers with really high security accounts and don't check them. Next up, let's see here. Can we check locks in a database? If so, how do we do it? Yes. Tell me more about like the problem that you're trying to solve though, because there are so many ways. Let me switch my camera lighting just a little bit. There are so many ways to do it, and I want to know more about the problem that you're trying to solve because there are just tons and tons of ways of doing that. Hi, D-Raj. What needs to be considered when we have to build a SQL server that has huge insert work, like 100,000 inserts a second? Oh, cool. That is a fairly unusual issue, like 100,000 batch inserts per second. The term to look for is ingest. I-N-G-E-S-T. So I'll give you a couple of links. So you SQL Server ingest. And so there are probably going to be, that's terrible. That's not good. Let's try, what the hell's that guy's name in New York City? Maybe Hackathon? Might be able to get, that's not good either. Oh man, there's a guy, what is his name? Oh, I've seen his name. Oh man, this is no, not Eric. No, that's funny. It's really Dev says Eric. No. Oh my gosh, he works for Fujitsu. Hackathon. I think it's Fujitsu. It's not it. Oh, this is gonna kill me not knowing the guy's name. He does SQL Saturday. No, not Neil's. SQLSaturday.com. Now all of a sudden my keyboard is trying to go into emoji mode. That's fantastic. That's none of those. Oh, this is going to kill me. No, so he's this. Oh, this will kill me. Oh, well. Okay, so anyway, are there special things to keep in mind coming back over to this? Oh, that'll drive me crazy. Are there things to keep in mind? Yes, it isn't an easy design pattern to work for, but what you may want to use is Hackathon, SQL Server's in-memory OLTP, to use as a staging area. You pull the data into Hackathon that can handle hundreds of thousands of batch requests per second, and then from there you batch load it off to more permanent tables. This is a rare use case of loading 100,000 rows per second continuously. If you want, email me, go to brentozar.com, click email up at the top, and when I think of the guy's name, I will connect you to him. Works for, I want to say it's Fujitsu as a consultant, but he has a bunch of presentations out there about how he does high-end performance tuning for that exact use case, ingesting stock trades real time. Next up, iCode to Play asked, do you have any good links for PHP? No, sorry, unfortunately no. Next up, Katsan says, what if it's a matter of working on the Death Star versus learning NoSQL and troubleshooting for a job? For me, it all comes down to the quality of the work conditions. I don't want to be around someone who does force chokes for a living. It just seems a little bit risky to me. So I'd probably like a better boss than that. Next up, Deb says, how should I differentiate when to use a SQL database and a NoSQL database? Do you need to do a join? If you need to join two tables together, then Coyote says NetOtter. No, y'all stop throwing it out because you're not even on the right track. I hear where you're going, but you're not going to think of him either because he almost never presents. So if you need to join tables together, you want a relational database because it helps you with relationships between objects. If you don't do joins, NoSQL databases make much more sense. Like if you're just going to put in a value or a key and you're going to get a value back, NoSQL makes more sense there. Next up, let's see. Oh, Surly Dev says, Pluralsight tip. If you see a course that you want on Pluralsight, get yourself a free month trial from a user group. A what? A what? Oh, those things we used to go to before the whole virus thing. Oh, yeah, I forgot about those. It's been a while. Next up, Mr. Caney says, what are worker threads used and reserved, and are they any way useful for analyzing query performance? They can be, but it tends to be cases where your SQL Server's under a lot of queries simultaneously. Think like hundreds or thousands of queries that are trying to execute at exactly the same time. It's extremely rare that you want to start there. You should probably start with wait stats instead. Worker threads are somewhere that you get to after troubleshooting somewhere else that leads you to worker threads. Next thing, E. Mitchell says, Brent, love what you're doing on Twitch. Thank you. With COVID forcing everything, can you talk into a remote? Can you talk about how you've embraced the changes and how you feel about SQL communities going forward? So I have worked remote since like 2004, I think. But I always had two prices. I had one price to work remotely and then a separate price to work on site. So it's $2,600 a day US for me to work remotely, $5,000 a day US for me to work on site. And I always said, if you want me on site, I'll go, but I would rather work remote. And that's how I kind of incentivized clients to choose that. Even having said that, I used to travel about 1 week a month to clients who were like, no, trust me, we need to have you on site, or it's worth us to get a bunch of people inside the office on site. It was the same thing with conferences. I needed to make at least 5,000 a day for me to justify going on site. Otherwise, I'd rather just stay home in my pajamas and get drunk. So, right, whatever. And if that sounds like a lot, it's not really that. I don't think Linda Evangelista back in the 70s had this quote where she goes, "I don't get out of bed for less than $10,000 a day." I'm like, hey, I'm cheaper than Linda Evangelista was 50 years ago. So there's that. So I love it. I love being at home. I love working from home. I love that when I close this computer down, I can go out to my couch and my wife and my car and my bed at night. I'm all about it. And I would really like to see I'm not in a rush to go see people again. I have asthma. And if I had to go like shake hands with you people, you don't wash your hands, you cough in your hands, you fart while I'm talking to you, you burp and I can smell that you had Taco Bell for lunch. Nothing against Taco Bell. I was sad when they got rid of the 7-layer burrito too, but it doesn't mean that I need to smell it on your mouth every time that you burp. For God's sakes, brush your teeth. Can see how coronavirus is spreading so bad with, given how bad y'all are at self-sanitation. So I am not in a rush to go see y'all again. I'm not in a rush to hug people. See, they chase me even when I'm like here in the thing. But I love this. To me, this is heaven. I look forward to the day when it's over just so that I can have friends over and see friends again. But I would love to be able to go through the rest of my career and not have to go to an in-person conference again. Viper says, I'm pretty sure unclean teeth does not promote the spread of COVID. Are you sure though? Because if I can smell your breath, that means you're not wearing a mask. So as far as I'm concerned, we have a problem. Some people needed to wear a mask before COVID. That's all I'm saying. I'm saying a lot of things. Matthew says, regarding Scott Wall's earlier question, CPU parking is still a problem, at least with VMware. So it's tough for me to remember what happened 10 minutes ago, but sure, I'll take your word for it. Is that something that I see like as the cause of your problems is CPU parking? That seems a little rare to me. Quadson says over in Twitch, Breno's our PLE. How do we judge it? You don't. PLE is a garbage BS metric that should not be used in the year 2020. It's worthless. It's just absolute junk. Next up, Todd says, we hit that already. Let me go close that out because I got that. Let's get down to Goodoff's question because Goodoff asked this a while ago. Goodoff says, this is more conceptual. I would like you to do interpretive dance. The DBA at the company I'm with is refusing to learn or update his skills on Azure despite the company pushing forward rapidly. He is one of those guys who doesn't do a FAQ. Any resource classes you suggest, because I've sat extensively with him, but he's stonewalling. Leave him. Leave him. Somebody doesn't want to learn something. Okay. Cool. Who cares? I mean, it's like, why are you his career admin? Why do you want to beat it into him? If somebody doesn't want to learn something, leave him be. So what if the company's going forward? Maybe he's cashed out mentally. Maybe he doesn't like you. Maybe he doesn't like working with you. Maybe he's tired of you telling him what to do. If you're not his administrator, leave it there. If you're not his manager, leave it there. If you are his manager, just go, okay, this person is not interested in the technologies that we need in order to move somewhere. Let it go. But I know trying to be gentle about this. Why would I try to be gentle about this? What the hell? It's my webcast. I get to do anything that I want to. So there are some people out there who believe that certain trends are going to die a nasty, horrible death. And they're right. There are some trends that are going to be absolute junk. You remember how NoSQL was everywhere for a while? They're like, NoSQL, we should abandon SQL databases. No more SQL. And then they learned their hard lesson. They were like, you know what? Not only SQL. That's what we meant. No stood for something, it turns out. We weren't just saying, no, we like SQL. So there, for a while there, Microsoft was like, Azure is everything. We're all in. We're not going to put $1 into the box product again. And a lot of people got burned off because they're like, well, that's not even really true. Goofoff says, I would, but the OP's manager doesn't fire anyone. That's fine. If their manager won't fire someone, you know what they will fire people for? Is harassing them. Leave them alone. If someone doesn't want to learn something, it reminds me of my friends, and I use this term loosely, who think of PowerShell as a hammer. They're like, we're going to learn you some PowerShell. Get over here, PowerShell, PowerShell, PowerShell. And I'm like, what kind of butthole are you? What, if someone doesn't want to learn something, leave it. Let it go. Walk away from it. It's just like not everyone likes the same kind of adult entertainment that I like. And I'm not out there just trying to, get everyone to watch the exact same kind. Look, this isn't a perfect analogy, but you get where I'm going. Next up, Goodone says, aren't I terrible? Goodone says, hi Brent, good morning. How should we approach affinity masking? You should not. Don't touch that with a 10-foot pole. If you need to micromanage performance at the CPU level, go put them on separate operating systems. You don't want them on the same operating system. Divide them up into different VMs. This is what VMs are beautiful for. Let you micromanage, give some VMs 2 cores, some VMs 8 cores, and then you can let performance take care of itself that way. But never, period, full stop, don't touch affinity mask. Bad idea. Arjun over on YouTube says, any suggestions from SQL on cloud, Azure or AWS? Generally, this piggybacks off of that question that just came up a minute ago from about trying to get somebody to, or goof offs. Generally, the choice of architecture, Azure versus AWS, is generally chosen by the executives at a company. It's not chosen by the line level of employees. Generally, it's chosen by high-level architects who review a lot of different options, or they hire a consulting firm. I'm not selling my services. I don't really help people choose that either. Atrionic says, everyone just please go with Azure so my Microsoft stock goes up. I think to me too, it's kind of like choosing between, say, Oracle and SQL Server or SQL Server and Postgres. You don't generally make the decision based on technical merits of one of those at any given time. What you generally do is say, which one is the horse that we want to get on? That horse is going to stumble from time to time. From time to time, other horses will be ever so slightly faster, but is this the company that we want to bet our future on? You're not going to lose with either Microsoft, Amazon, or Google. You're going to be fine. All of them are big cloud players. All of them are going to bring out slightly different services from time to time, but you're going to be fine with SQL Server on any of them. None of them really suck. It's the same as like choosing a server vendor back in the 90s and 2000s. Some people were like, Dell or death. And other people were like, I'll die before I drive an HP. People are like that. It doesn't really matter. They're just boxes. That's my feeling with the cloud too as well. SP Help DBA says, thank you, Brent. I will be the first to enroll on your training once you can sell to the EU. I don't see that happening anytime in the near future either. Not since the EU struck down the Privacy Shield law. That's kind of the end of that. So, and it's not that I harvest your data. It's just that let's be honest, I don't want to deal with EU regulators coming in and ask me to go to court somewhere. I mean, why would I want to go do that? Screw it. And it was only ever 5% of my revenue anyway, so. Aref says, could a store procedure make an entire SQL server go down? Yes. Error logs show trace flags on and off and exit enter. SQL prompt running validity check causing an exit. Yes, absolutely can. If you ever want to give yourself nightmares, go to SQLServerUpdates.com and read the list of things that Microsoft fixes. You can totally cause SQL Server to go down just by querying system DMVs. So sad but true. Make sure that you stay reasonably patched. And I say reasonably patched as in stay within like 60 days. And I don't just mean on your workstation too. Obviously your Redgate, for example, SQL prompt should be patched as well. Homer, good to see you, Homer. SQL, damn it, why can't I think of your name on Instagram and rapping and Homer, damn it, SQL, and I have your sticker, but it's not on this iPad, it's on my other iPad. Dang, dog, that's going to kill me because he has a song that usually I constantly think of. Let's see, next up, David says, kill a DBA, that's it, thank you, there we go. David says, we're planning on moving our entire database from Oracle to SQL Server, and the company is proposing Golden Gate. So what that's for is to keep the two platforms in sync. So Golden Gate will read from the transaction log on one server and write to like the SQL Server. As far as I know, I think that's the only one that attempts to work just from the transaction log. I think Golden Gate's still the only one that does that. So just keep in mind that the only thing that that's good for is just copying the changes from one to another. It doesn't fix migrating all your code. And of course, there are a lot of code differences between those two that can end up causing you problems. Next up, Arjun says, any good websites for automation runbook creation? No, I haven't seen anything for that. That's an interesting question. The place that I would probably start with is DBA Tools. Oh, Pierre, that's okay. So Pierre's answer may also work for that replicating between Oracle and Golden Gate there too as well. But for that, I would say dbatools.io, dbatools.io. Not because it does it for you, but the people who are into that kind of thing are the kinds of people who go contribute at DBA Tools. So if you go look at their community and go get active in their community, their Slack channels and all that, they'll be the kinds of people who will have good answers for that. A quick shout out to this week's sponsor. So this week's sponsor, if you've been thinking about putting together column store indexes inside your database, columnscore.com. If you want to work with column store indexes, go take a simple 7-question quiz, get your column score for that particular table. That'll tell you whether or not column store indexes are a good fit for that particular table. So that's over at columnscore.com. Next up, let's see. Pierre got me intrigued. 8 cores on the server. So unfortunately, I can't do that kind of consulting rapidly back and forth over YouTube. Hopefully that's fair. But that is the kind of consulting that I do. If you want to hire me for my consulting, obviously, if you've already solved the problem, I'm not too worried about it. But that is the kind of challenge that I go and hit during my consulting. Josh on YouTube says, I just want to say that your first responder kit is marvelous and thank you for saving your bottom several times. You are welcome. I would like to thank everyone who volunteers their time building stuff into the first responder kit. It's been a while since I've done pull requests live over there. I do consulting in the EU. I do consulting. I just don't contract with individuals. It just has to be with companies. But I want to give a shout out to all the folks out there who selflessly develop things to improve the first responder kit too, because I use that every single day. It's just magical. It saves my life too. Let's see. Oh, Steve says, do you have to get any special permission from Microsoft to do SQL Server training? Are there any IP issues or issues that your competitor that are training? So here's a way that Microsoft training works. Microsoft puts together training and then they give it away for free to people who are Microsoft certified trainers. You got to be a Microsoft certified trainer in order to use their material. And then their material is kind of standard all throughout the world. And it's garbage. It's just junk. It's just no good at all. I've sat through one Microsoft training class after another, and I've just gone through and been like, oh my God, you actually want to work? That doesn't make sense. That advice doesn't ring true. It's not really real in the real world. So I don't do Microsoft certified training. I build my own training material from scratch. If I tried to use Microsoft's free training material for Microsoft certified trainers, I would get sued because I'm not a Microsoft certified trainer and I will never. I would say I would never. Maybe I would be in another world where they allowed you to really reinterpret that training and put real world advice into it. I'd consider it. But I've just seen so many Microsoft certified trainers that grab the book and try to parrot it out there as if that everything in the book is true. And often it's simply not. Microsoft certified trainers are, for some courses, for some material, they're totally qualified. But other times I just see MCTs grabbing that material and preaching as if they've done it themselves. And then you ask a single question about real world and they just don't have the answers, which is kind of a pain in the rear. Sukhvir says, I saw a yo-yo in one of your streams. How is the practice going? It's going to sound funny. I only practice when I'm on vacation, and sometimes I forget to bring the yo-yo on vacation. And I forgot to bring the yo-yo on the vacation last week, so I didn't get any practice in last week. Why am I only allowed to do it when I'm on vacation? Because if I do it in the house, I break things. I'm extremely clumsy, so yeah, I still suck pretty bad at the yo-yo. Really bad. Coolstead says, what steps do you recommend for automatically archiving data on a schedule from a production database that isn't a warehouse yet but should be? This is an interesting question. Okay. The problem I usually run into is when I ask users, let me answer your question. Here, I'll go show you. So if you search for Brent Ozar concurrency week delete, I've got a post out there on how to delete just some rows from a really large table. So search for Brent Ozar concurrency week delete. And both of these actually, the one on soft deletes is pretty good as well. But this will teach you how to archive stuff out of a large table without taking table level locks. It's a technique called fast ordered deletes. I didn't come up with it. It's from Microsoft originally, but they took the blog post down where they originally wrote it. Microsoft has this thing where they just rip out blog posts all the time. Homer says the camera transition was nice. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. And like, if you like that, you'll also like, I have separate little things where people can go in and like watch different chats and little different camera angles and all kinds of things. And a shout out to this week's sponsor. This week's sponsor, Column. I put a ridiculous amount of work into. I have to show this off to Homer, but normally it doesn't show the chat is ready to display messages. We were just troubleshooting, and I should take that off now. We were troubleshooting a problem that we were having with Restream, which normally shows all of my chats. I hit the wrong button. Cancel, don't refresh, say okay, and we'll come back over here to this. All right, next up, let's see here, 7:56. We have 3 minutes left. Let's take one last question. Let's see here, one last question. Pythor. Pythor says, do you use any third-party extensions for Management Studio? I don't. And the reason why I don't isn't because they're not good. There are a lot of really good third-party extensions out there. The problem is I hop from client machine to client machine all the time. Like people will drop a large bag of money on the desk and they'll say, Brent, we need you to solve this problem right now. And I'm often not allowed to install anything that's like a setup exe. I can usually hoodwink them into installing my first responder kit, but that's about as deep as it goes. So I don't have any list of recommendations like that. I can see why you would ask that, though. I would also tell you that if you ever decide that you want to go towards being a consultant, you need to get comfortable using things that are open source rather than paid add-ons, because often when you go to a client, they won't allow you to install anything that's a paid add-on. So it just gets tricky there. If you're a contractor, that's different. If you're going to work at the same place for 6 months, 12 months in a row and work there continuously, then by all means, you can install all the third-party tools you want. Well, that is everyone. All the questions for this week. We'll hit it. I'll do this again in like a week and a half or so. This next upcoming weekend I'm working, but I want to give a warm round of applause to Surly Dev for managing the questions this week. Surly Dev does a wonderful job of keeping everyone in line, as iDriveFaster says. Wonderful individual. So have a great weekend, everybody. I will see a lot of y'all at SQL Bits this week, presenting over at SQL Bits, doing all-day conferences, which is why this is like the end of my day here. I'm winding down my day because I'm getting on UK time at like 9 a.m. My sessions finish over at SQL Bits, so then I get to go off, and now I can go downstairs and go get a lox and bagel and go enjoy what is now my evening. So thanks a lot, y'all, and I will see y'all next time. Adios.